For that too. All right. Welcome. My name is Forrest. I'm a job placement director here, joined by Sam, another one of our job placement directors. Many of you probably already know us, but if you don't, nice to meet you all. Basically, what we do here at the Tech Academy is help our graduates land jobs in the industry. Kind of opening us up today, like an open forum style, to take on all your job placement questions and help you feel more comfortable about jumping into your inevitable job search. Whether you're on the first course or graduated for a while now, we'd love to help you with your specific problem. And I'm sure everybody's got some sort of question about the job search. So I'm just going to kind of open it up. If nobody has any questions right off the bat, I've got a couple samples we could jump into to get you comfortable. But I'm just going to open it up to the floor right now for anybody that has a question. Feel free to raise your hand, shout out. There's a little raise hand button at the bottom if you prefer, but whatever's easiest for you. Let's hear those questions. Yeah, go for it.
I'm sure this one will come up. I see a lot. I've kind of just started looking through job listings. I'm looking for, data science, data analyst type stuff. And I'm seeing, filtering out entry-level jobs and seeing a lot of entry-level, but requiring a master's and 2+ of experience.
Mm-hmm.
And knowledge of several different languages and things like that. And I've heard that there's a lot of mismatch between HR departments and actual technology departments that are hiring for. So kind of like, how do you manage those expectations, and what should you go for anyways, and what should you count yourself out of?
It's a great question, and that's like the question, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody not apply to a single thing because they're like, nothing says 3 months of experience on the required, nothing. I don't fit anything because I don't have 2 to 5 years experience. I don't have a bachelor's degree. Basically, if you think about a job posting, it's kind of like a wish list. We call it like a unicorn person. They're looking for like this perfect individual that fits this role, and that person literally does not exist pretty much 99% of the time. So you'll see things like mandatory 5 to 10 years experience, mandatory knowledge in these 15 different topics, mandatory bachelor's degree, mandatory all this stuff, and it's an entry-level position, which is like bonkers, right? Like, how do you get that if you're an entry-level person? Well, like Kenzie kind of mentioned, there's this sort of disconnect between who's writing these posts and who's actually hiring for them. There's actually a pretty funny video that I'll try to link in the chat about the relationship between the tech side and the HR side, about how those job postings get written. And it's sort of like, hey, we need somebody who's good at SQL, and a college degree would be great, and it'd be nice if they've been working in the industry for a while. And the HR person writes that down like a mandatory 5 years experience, mandatory bachelor's degree, mandatory this, and it's not accurate. We see people every single week landing jobs from postings that say mandatory this, that, or the other, and they don't have those exact skills, and they're still landing the positions because they can prove their skills, because they can back up what they've done, because they're a charismatic person who's just fun to work with. So I don't want you to ever feel like nervous about applying to positions because you feel completely unqualified, because if that's the case, you probably wouldn't apply to anything, because lots of these positions are going to have skills that are beyond what and it doesn't mean you're not qualified. It just means that they're looking for this person that doesn't exist. Does that kind of make sense? I mean, I'm sure you've seen a lot of those requirements and you'll be like, how would I ever get that as a junior level position? We see it all the time, and I don't know why it's that way. It's just kind of a problem with the industry. But don't let that scare you off, because you'll basically never see a position that says 0 years experience required. You'll always see like 3 to 5. But apply to it. Apply to everything. That's kind of the, what's the worst thing that could happen if you apply to something that's over your head? They don't call you. They turn you down. Move on to the next person. Move on to the next one.
I think I'm more afraid of actually getting hired for a position that I'm not ready for, and then having a bunch of expectations.
If you're hired for it, then you are ready for it. I mean, so in that situation, if you an example, you go in for a position that's way beyond your scope, and you get to the interview portion, they're gonna want to know what you know, and if they hire you based on what you've told them and your experience, then you are qualified, and you kind of just get thrown to the into the fire. And that's the best place to learn, in my opinion, is to you're never going to be 100% ready for that first job. As much as you think like I want to fill out every single requirement they need before I get the job, you'll never get that. And when you get to that point, you'll be overqualified for it. That first job you're going to do so much learning on, and it's going to be like, you know, going to school all over again, because you're going to learn their way of doing things, and you're going to use, you know, this actual practical skills. So don't be afraid. If you get the job, if you get an offer for a position you think you're unqualified for, go for it, because that's just amazing. They obviously think you're qualified for it because they gave you the offer. They wouldn't have done that otherwise, you know. So what's the worst thing that can happen? It's, you know, move on to the next one. It's not that bad. So I encourage everybody to apply to everything they can. That kind of covers the full basis of that question, hopefully. Does that make sense, Kenzie? Do you feel like, you know, is that okay? It's a little nerve-wracking, I realize, but don't hesitate. You just got to do it. Don't double think it. All right. Who else has got a question? I think there might be some chat. There's also a chat. If you have any questions you want to throw in the chat, feel free to do that. We'll start. Rob, I see a hand there. Go for it. I can't hear you, Rob. I think you're on mute. You got to click the mute button at the bottom, the speaker. There you go.
How that happened.
There you
go. I've had my first 5 rejection emails from the places I applied for so far. And I'm wondering, I know when you have an interview and you don't hear from them, whatever, you should send them a thank you note. What about even like a thank you note for the ones that do like not give you an interview?
Good question. Sam, you want to fill this one?
I would probably lean more towards, it depends on the kind of communication you had with them. If you had like a conversation over the phone, or if you had something a little bit more personal, then I would, because there are potential contacts that you can add within your network. If it's a little bit of an impersonal, like it feels like an automated response, I think there's other things better suited to your time.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, and following up with that, like just like she said, it really depends on the kind of rejection. I've seen some really nice, heartfelt rejections that were very personalized, and they were actually like written by a person. For those, you know, it's a different story, because you might be able to, at least if not get another chance at the job, create a connection like Sam mentioned, and further on down the road, if you're more qualified, you know, or even let them know like, hey, if there's anything else that's available.
Well, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Keep me in mind, because I would love to work for your company. I've heard a story. Justin Perry, who did a tech talk for us about a month ago, he had an interview, did a coding challenge, and he bombed it like horribly. He did so bad on it, and was rejected for the position. And he reached out to them and said, "Hey, that was a horrible demonstration of my skills. I was not focused. I think I could do better. You know, please give me another shot." And they gave him another shot. He got another interview because of that, because he reached out, he, you know, sent a heartfelt message to them, and they just happened to, you know, be nice enough to give him another shot. He didn't land the job, but he got another interview. So it's, once again, what's the worst thing that can happen? It's just, might as well, you know, I think that's worth trying. All right, let's see. Who else has got a question for us today?
We do, Forrest, we do have in the chat, Joshua talked about getting past the HR algorithm, just kind of the initial, when you submit your resume, when they go through it, just they have like the automated computer algorithm they use. So just, I think we've heard in the past that it's best to tailor your resume for the job you're applying for. And with tailoring it, then you can get, you definitely get noticed rather than sending out just kind of a cookie cutter resume to everyone. So
exactly.
Go ahead and, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so you absolutely should. So you have your default resume, and that's the thing you're kind of sending out in bulk to everything. As you look at job postings, look at the words that are actually in the job posting. Look at the skills required. Look at like even the words in the description of the company. And if the company has like traits that they talk about themselves, if they have like a motto or a stance, or they have like, sometimes they'll have like, these are our 3 pillars of our company, or, you know, honesty, companionship, or yada, yada, yada. Put those words into your resume. If you can insert that somewhere in your resume, not like randomly hidden somewhere, but add it to your summary. Talk about, you know, if they mention like companionship and, you know, whatever being really big in their, you know, whatever their motto or whatever, put that in your summary somewhere, because that's going to help you. That's actually going to help you pop up on these automated algorithms to appear. But also, one thing to consider is that sometimes these automated, I can't remember the exact name of these, like SSC or something like that.
ATS scan.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes that question too. You know, I don't know if there's anything related to it, but I think the ATS scan that they do initially when they scan your resume can, if you've ever been given an interactive situation where it interprets your resume and gives you back like what it's interpreted as, that's what really clued me into that. My resume, you know, as far as being human readable was great. I've had like where I worked at 2 different groups within one company. So I had like 2 subcategories under one company listing. That confuses the hell out of it. Another thing that confuses the hell out of it is if you work for a contractor. So if you put both the contracting company as well as the company you work for, like Intel for Vanderhouwen or something like that, that confuses it too. You need to put just one company in each line and then put in your comments, maybe say through Vanderhouwen or something like that, so it doesn't confuse it. And what would be really good is if anybody knows of any good online place to scan your resume to see what the ATS scan does. Now they say job scan, but that basically just matches you up with, you know, it checks to see if your resume matches up with a job listing. It doesn't actually check your resume and say, hey, you need to fix this. That would be a good thing to have if you have a site somebody has out there that does an ATS scan of your resume, so you can basically fix it.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah, if there's some sort of you know, way to test to see what kind of pops up when you scan your resume, what keywords are popping up, what can they see, what can't they see. You know, on that same note, sometimes PDFs aren't scannable by these ATS softwares. So if you only have a PDF resume and you're sending it out, there's a chance that it's not getting past this first stage if it's going through an ATS scan. So it's good to have multiple versions of your resume. I don't know if you went to the Tech Talk a couple weeks ago with Edmund Jones. He has a pretty resume. It's one that he gives to actual people to look at it. If he's going to email directly to somebody, if somebody's going to physically look at it, it's, you know, it's beautiful, it's well organized, looks good. And then he has his ATS resume, and it's ugly. It's really ugly, but it has everything listed out really accurately, line by line, so that when it goes to the scanning, it can see everything, and there's no confusion in that. So if you haven't seen that Tech Talk, I highly suggest going back and watching Eddie's Tech Talk. It also goes into detail about specifying, like writing a specific resume for a job and fitting those skills in that resume so that you stand out for it. Because if you just have your generic resume you send to everybody, then you're only hitting like a fifth of those jobs. You know, you could be hitting each one of them individually if you have skills that are really relevant to that specific job. And even if you have them on all your resumes, you know, if it's like a JavaScript job and you have JavaScript on all your resumes, really go into detail about the JavaScript that you work with and the things you've done and the frameworks and all that jazz on that specific resume, pointing out as much as possible.
Yeah,
go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say another thing to do is I just forgot what I was going to say, but anyway, but yeah, but I think it's one thing sometimes what I do is I also concatenate a cover letter to my resume. I don't know if that's a good idea. You know, sometimes it doesn't ask you for a cover letter when you're signing up on a website, and so I concatenate them together. And I don't know if that's a good idea or not. Maybe somebody else would throw out an idea on that.
That's a good question. You know, I don't know so much about, you know, attaching it directly. Having it as a separate file and sending a cover letter is always a good idea. If they don't,
but you can't do it. If they don't give you any option to do it, then
the option.
Just send it together. You know.
Mm-hmm. I know with certain sites like ZipRecruiter doesn't give you the option right away. I don't know if anybody's used ZipRecruiter before, but they have like a quick apply. You can apply to like 100 jobs in like an hour because you can just hit quick apply a bunch of times. But they don't give you the option to send a cover letter. But if you go back to the application later, after you've applied to it, then you can append a cover letter to it. So sometimes you just gotta like find a way to weasel it in. But a lot of times they don't give you options. If they don't give you an option for a cover letter, it often means that it's not that important. So I wouldn't waste your time, you know, stressing over a cover letter if there's no way to really submit one. All right, let's see, who else? Rob's got another question. Go for it, Rob.
Well, it's not really a question. It's just something that happened that I just thought I'd bring up.
Yeah.
This phone interview that I had for the software tester position,
yeah,
I looked at the listing. I've never seen one like this before. It was really detailed. But there was a paragraph in there. They said you'd be working with the customer service department and also the developers. There was a paragraph in there that basically made it sound like don't try to beat up the developers. There's this really weird paragraph I have never seen in any job listing before. It said,
Don't try to beat them up.
yeah, a non-confrontational, to be able to work non-confrontationally with the developers. So I don't know if they had something happen once or.
Yeah, maybe they just really prefer everybody prefers a non-confrontational sort of environment.
Right. It was just weird to see it in the job listing.
Yeah, I'd like to see the wording. I've definitely seen a lot of job listings where they say, this is a friendly environment. We're all a team here. Where everybody, likes each other. We don't want anybody who's like a sour apple. But I'd like to see the actual wording on that one to see.
Oh yeah, I'll look it up and I'll send it to you.
What made it stand out? All right. Who else has any quandaries for us? Anything job related? I know everybody here can think of at least one question that they're unsure about when it comes to the job search. So don't hesitate, or I'll start calling out names.
Does anyone have their hand raised right now, Forrest?
Looks like Michael has his hand raised, but I'm not sure if that's previous. If that's
that was me having it earlier, so let me take it.
Okay. Other than that, I can't actually tell. Let's see here. Oh, Marlene looks like she has her hand raised. Sorry, Marlene, I didn't notice you there. Go for it. Oh, audio's a bit wonky, but she's wondering, when you submit an application, how much should you include? Should you add a portfolio, cover letter, etc.? Sam, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So it's usually best to have all the materials all in one kind of wrapped package, so to speak. So when you're asking for like a submission to a job application, you'll want your resume to have all materials linked to it. Potentially you'll have your LinkedIn account, your GitHub account, your website portfolio with a link to it. You may even have links to the individual READMEs for the projects you're referencing within your resume. So that way, at any one point in time, anybody looking at your materials will be able to find their way to the materials that are most relevant to them. Excuse me. I often suggest that you have, if you're able to include a cover letter, which we talked about, not always is a great opportunity, but if you can keep them to the same format, and so I usually suggest just keeping the same header, so that way you've got all the materials on your cover letter, so that way if for some odd reason that it gets detached from your resume, that you can include that same materials for them, and then they can route back to you and potentially reach out to you if they need to. I'm not sure if that answers all of your question. How does that work? Okay, good.
Thanks. And just to follow up with that a little bit, when you talk about linking your LinkedIn and your GitHub and all that stuff on there, like resumes are all digital these days. I mean, some people might actually print them out, but most often it's just digital. So having a link on there for everything is great because they can, from one place they can click and go through all of your profiles and see everything quickly, because you got to think about how much time somebody's going to spend looking at your resume. And if they're looking at 100 resumes, it's like 30 seconds they're going to spend on your resume. So if you have your links conveniently on there, your GitHub, your LinkedIn, your portfolio website, then they can see everything you have quickly without having to, search through it on your resume. All right. Let's see. Who else has got some questions for us? Got some sample questions if nobody can think of any to start off.
I have more questions, but I don't want to monopolize on the time.
Please go for it.
What are good ways good questions to ask to kind of get a read on what the company culture is like? So I guess this is more like you interviewing them, but I don't know. I've worked in lots of toxic work environments, mostly because I've worked in the service industry for a long time. And I know maybe my first job I won't be able to be very picky, but eventually I would like to become pickier about work environments. But everyone says like, oh, we're a family, we get along so well, and it's often BS. So what are some good red flags to look out for, or the right questions to ask in that situation?
That's a good question. The first thing that pops in my head is that it's almost impossible to hide if your company is not a fun place to work because of websites like Glassdoor or Indeed or whatnot. Because people can actually review the company that they worked at on, like Glassdoor is kind of the one that I go to when somebody's like, is this a trusted company? Is it someplace I'd like to work? Well, go find them on Glassdoor. They're reviewed on there. And you can see, like, you don't want to take everything as fact, but you might be able to get if you see, 4 or 5 different reviews saying this place is very toxic, everybody here is kind of evil, then that might give you a better idea. In terms of questions you can ask to get a better idea, that's kind of it's kind of a toughie, because the interviewer isn't going to necessarily tell you. They want you to want the job, so they're not going to tell you anything that's like, "Ooh, I'd watch out for Karen because she's evil," or whatever. They'd want to hide any of those details away. So you can typically get an idea of the feel of a company based on their online presence, who works there, their LinkedIn presence, reviews on websites like Glassdoor. The attitude of the interviewer. Say, it's somebody who's just impatient and rude and not really worth your time, then that's kind of an idea. But you did bring up like questions for the interviewer, which is really a good topic, because you always want to have questions for the interviewer at the end. This is like one of the most important parts of an interview, is questions for the interviewer at the end. If you come with no questions, then that shows that you are not interested in the position, that you were not prepared for this interview. You always want to have something you can ask them at the end, whether that be like, tell me about the culture here. I'd love to know, it could be as simple as that. Like, tell me about the culture day to day. Things are all remote right now, so it might be a little bit different, but even just asking about the culture, about the company, what's the day to day look like for an employee of this company? What kind of interaction with other employees do we have? How much teamwork based work environment, stuff is there going on? That might help you give a better idea of depending on their answers. I don't think I've ever heard somebody go into an interview and hear that, oh, this is a toxic place, I don't want to work here. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but that's kind of.
Sometimes, at least in the restaurant industry, it's like if they are overemphasizing how much of a family they are, that's almost a red flag for me.
Yeah. I worked in the restaurant industry for 10 years, and I can attest to that. But it's different. Typically the tech culture is really professional and really friendly and really welcoming. It's a bit of a different industry from the restaurant industry, which I came from. So from my personal experience, it's a far more professional industry with far less tolerance for that sort of behavior.
One small question to add to that can help you kind of gauge as far as how much they value the new people coming in. You can always ask questions regarding their onboarding process, how long it would take to get up to speed, what kind of projects you might be working on, what the mentorship will be like. And then you can get a good sense of the value that they have in providing that information to their newer employees, to bringing them up to speed. So then I find it's like a real good gauge that you can kind of judge offhand that same kind of like what do they value, and that's a good indicator.
Thank you.
That's really good. That's a really good point. Michael Neff added to the chat that there's a weekly meeting for tech jobs in Beaverton. Is that a virtual meeting weekly? Is that, can you find it on Meetup?
Is my voice on?
Yes.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's if you go to WorkSource, you go to my WorkSource or whatever, and you can see, hey, sign up for weekly group meetings and stuff like that. There's one that comes up every 9:30, on Fridays. We didn't have one last week, of course, because Thanksgiving, but we had one this morning. And there are also other ones too. She also has a Tuesday meeting one as well. There's another one too that isn't so much tech, but there's one that's in Lake Grove. There's a meeting on Monday mornings too at 8:30.
That's great.
But
Sure.
just an idea for other meetings to go for jobs. But I think she was focused on the high tech community in Beaverton area on the west side. So,
Gotcha. When you say high tech, you mean like higher end, like higher above an entry level position, or just like?
Well, it's more for high tech, the high tech community, more for high tech type jobs, for computing and fabrication, that sort of thing.
Cool. Gotcha. That'd be great. That'd be great. Even as a chance to network. We're always encouraging network and reaching out, and any opportunity you can have to meet people, whether or not you're in the Beaverton area or Portland area. There's tons of really awesome Portland meetups, and tech talks, and
she used to meet at the PCC there, in the Beaverton area. They used to go in the Beaverton area there, but obviously everything's online. She was even just talking about in her meeting, it's harder to recruit new people because, it's just not like it's in a physical place where people can find it anymore like it used to be. We go to the PCC, employment office there, and it's next door to. So, just something is a good invitation here for you to spread around for other people too that need jobs.
I think it's excellent. Yeah, any help is fantastic. Any opportunity is worth a little bit of a little bit of investigation. That's great.
And I have a feeling we're getting a lot of people coming in from California too these days too, because I don't know if you saw the rent values since the pandemic, but there's been a drop of rent in the Bay Area for like 31%. Because people can't afford to live there anymore. And,
yeah.
And so there's probably a lot of people from California coming up here, and it's just a matter of time before rent starts dropping here too. But
that's something to look forward to.
Well, unless you're in a place where you can't afford to move out. I can't.
All right, let's see. Who else has got a job question? Michael Hinshaw. I like your background. I bet you got something you're curious about. Oh, can't quite hear you. I'm not sure if it's a mic issue. Not getting any feedback. Maybe go for the chat. Oh, chat box maybe. All right, we'll throw your question in chat if you got one, and then I'll answer it that way. In the meantime, let's jump on. Let's see who else. Any other hand raises? Who else has got a question for us? Who here is working on networking right now? Who's working on, who's having trouble networking? Where to start? Maybe who to connect with? Kenzie, I see a hand up there. I'm sure everybody's kind of, if you're not familiar with LinkedIn, if this is your first kind of experience, going into tech, working with LinkedIn, then maybe that's something that you're nervous about. Maybe you don't know where to start or what your LinkedIn profile should look like or how useful of a tool it is. But that's a tool that I would emphasize to everybody, no matter what stage of the course you're on, is to start investing time into as early as possible. Even if you're like in the overview of software development course, like get your LinkedIn rolling, get a professional picture up there and start finding people to connect with. Look for companies in your area, look for tech companies, look for big tech companies, look for small tech companies, doesn't really matter. Reach out to people that work there, tell them about the schooling that you're doing and how you're interested in a position in software development and you notice they work at this company and you want to just connect and kind of pick their brain about what they do. I think that everybody, gets nervous about where to even begin with LinkedIn. Maybe people aren't social media fans. I know I'm not a fan of social media, so LinkedIn is tough for me to get into. But it's not, it's a professional, it's like your online portfolio. Every person that looks at your resume will also look at your LinkedIn. That is like 100% guaranteed. So if your LinkedIn is not up to guff, is it not looking good? Work on that before you start sending out a bunch of resumes. Get your LinkedIn looking good. You can always reach out to us if you're not at the port. We have a whole portion of the job placement course about LinkedIn. But if you're not there yet, reach out to us. I'd love to offer you assistance on what kind of things you should have on there, what kind of experience, what kind of people you should be following, what kind of companies you should be following, anything like that. I think we have a couple questions in the chat. Michael Smith, let's see, let's see, we got Rob first. Put my portfolio website on LinkedIn in the other day. Is it too early for that or am I just starting Python? No, I don't think it's too early to get it up there. I think anything you can add to your LinkedIn now is worthwhile. Any experience you can have out there is worth getting. If it's going to grab you some sort of attention, it's worth it. Obviously, if you have something up on your LinkedIn, you want to make sure that if you have like a project you're posting, having it functional is a bonus. If you have any questions whether or not it's worth putting up, reach out to us, like I said, and we can give you some advice on that. But the more you can have out there, the more data about yourself and your skills, the better. Michael Smith, late to the Zoom, and I'm meeting. Where's the link for the? Oh, cool, Michael Neff. Thank you for putting that link in there. I appreciate that. Sorry, I'm falling behind on this. Raven asks, coming from the service industry as well, how much of my work experience should I include in my resume as it doesn't pertain to tech? That's a great question. Sam, do you want to take this one away?
Sure. Most of the time what I do is, or at least I've started to more now, is to actually split your work experience up into two different parts. One being professional tech experience, or whichever particular field you're going to be studying. And then you can put in all the relevant work experience that involve those skills. And then you can have another separate section called other work experience, just to merely show that your time has been used to be working and you have other skills to offer, like working with people or being in the service industry and those kinds of things. So for that example, if you have other work experience, let's say you were a scuba diver, and it's it's very typical to, you can imagine what's involved with scuba diving industry. So you can just put scuba diving with the years, and then they get an idea that you have been working, but often it's actually an advantage to be switching into this industry because you're going to be the most up to date with the knowledge that you have right now. So I think it's definitely relevant to include your work history, but I found it the best to kind of split it up, and then you can leave it for like a second page material.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to follow up on that as well, every previous employment that you've had has something that's relevant to the tech industry. There's a way to find anything that's relevant. I was talking to somebody who was they were a music major in college. They performed classical music for the last some odd years, and wasn't totally sure how to incorporate that into how is that relevant. But there's absolutely ways to make that relevant. There's ways to talk about your dedication to something, your in customer service, for example. Like you're gonna be dealing with customers. You have clients in the tech world. How has your experience with customer service made you a better employee for this new job? Like how is that relevant to this new career? Me, I was a chef for 10 years, and I came out for this position. And how is that relevant to what I'm doing now? Well, I used to mentor people. I used to do coaching, and I trained a lot of people. And as ways to pull things out of your previous skills to make them relevant for this new career. I guarantee, no matter what job you had previously, there's ways to put things in there that would be relevant, at least as a show of character. They're not tech-related skills, maybe, but it shows that you are a hard worker, that you have a history of management, or that you have a history with customer service, or you have a history with anything that just makes you stand out as a genuine person or a hard worker, even if it's not exactly coding practice or what have you. Another thing to think about that with your domain skills, your previous skills, is tech permeates every aspect of our culture. There's tech jobs everywhere. You don't have to work at a tech company. You don't have to work at Microsoft or Apple, what have you. If you have restaurant experience, restaurants use technology. Every single restaurant uses some sort of technology. There is, POS systems and all this different ordering systems, and there's companies that sell to restaurants and they use ordering systems, and they have all this hardware and software involved. You can find those positions that are relevant to your domain skills. That just boosts your chances that much more. A really good demonstration of that is if you go watch Edmund Jones's tech talk from a couple weeks back. He talks about he used to work at a car dealer, or he did something with automotive, and he found an automotive position, a programming job at an automotive company, and he had worked at a car lot or something previously. And he was able to get all the way to the final interview based on hey, I have this previous experience. I know a lot about cars. I know it's not relative to tech, but this is a tech company that deals with automotive. Here's my previous domain skills and why it's relevant. And that got him all the way to the last interview. So, consider that when you're thinking about your domain skills and what to include on your resume. Michael Neff, note that if you have links to things on Web Archive in your LinkedIn or portfolio, double check those as linked in links. As links get screwed up, there to Web Archive links I had. Yeah. So if your links are on your website, if your links are on your resume, any of that stuff, make sure they work. I can't tell you how many times I've clicked on
it was LinkedIn that fouled them up a while back, and they were basically not functional and everything, and so I had to reset them. So if you have some older links in your LinkedIn that you haven't checked for a while, double check those again just to make sure they still work, because
exactly
messed up. And here's one example of one I did. I just put a link in there below. That's a snapshot of a website that I did many years ago. I started it from scratch, and now of course it's one of the biggest websites for a hair salon in the Bay Area right now. So
wow.
And so, it's something where you can show, hey, what did you do back in those days? And, get a snapshot of what you put on a website at that time, right?
Excellent. Absolutely. Any way you can show off previous experience, any way at all is relevant. All right. Frank, I'm sure you got some job placement questions.
Oh, yeah, I do. With me, LinkedIn is a pain. I'm totally off the web, I love technology and I love making things. I'm getting to love these things, our get-togethers and stuff. But I'm just having a hard time with LinkedIn. So, one thing that I ought to do is look at it like a program or something and somehow, make it into a project and then, look behind the code in the scenes and then I'll start working on it. Maybe that's what I'm going to do. So that's
yeah. Like look at it in a different sort of way. Look at it as a means to an end. You're doing this LinkedIn thing to help you land a job. If anything, if it's good, it's only going to help you. So it's not like it's some social media where you got to post what you're having for breakfast every day and what movie you're going to go watch. It's your online resume. It's a means to an end. It's going to get you that job. So if you look at it outside of the realm of this is just another social media platform and I don't give a crap about social media, instead of, okay, every employer that looks at my resume is going to look at this as well. What do they want to see? What can I do to make myself look the best? You give the same attention to your LinkedIn as you would your resume, because you wouldn't send out a bad resume. Why would you have a bad LinkedIn account? Marlene has got another question. Yeah, we got plenty of time, Marlene. I took an entry-level job at a tech company in facilities, thinking if I got my foot in the door, I would eventually move up. However, I've been working there for a few years and find it's tough to get people to take me seriously because of my current position. They see me as a girl that works in facilities. Any advice or for how to move up when you're in a tech company? That's a good question. That's a good question. I would say, I mean, I don't have a ton of experience when it comes to moving up once you're in a company, like what you need to do. Obviously, looking towards a position. If you have a position in mind you're working towards, that's a couple levels above you. Whatever that position requires, working towards proving that you can handle that position. What you mentioned that people don't take you seriously because you're working facilities. What do you mean they don't take you seriously? Like, are you still programming? Are you the projects you're working on, they don't take seriously? Is that specifically what you're referring to? Or are you not? So it says an entry-level job. Yeah, I'd like to know what they're not taking seriously in specific there. I might be able to help you out a little more particularly with that problem. They don't believe you have enough work experience because you're at a boot camp. Yeah, I mean, that's something that, you got to work around, because people might look at that and say, well, there's no degree here. There's no years of experience. Why do we hire you for this position? Why are you worthy of this position? You got to prove it to them. You got to go out and show them. You got to work on the things that are necessary for that job. Say you're working for a React position, or you're working for a C# position, or what have you. Prove that you know what you're talking about when it comes to those things. Build apps with that every day in C#. Practice every single day and show them that you're actively learning and you're working on it. And having something physical that you can show them, okay, this is a React position. Yeah, I've done React before. Oh, you don't believe me? Okay, well, here's something I've actually done before. Here's proof of it, and here's what I'm working on now. Once, there's a kind of problem I see a lot where somebody leaves the boot camp and then they just kind of stop coding until they land their first job. You got to keep on it. You got to keep working at code. You got to keep code in and out of work. You got to turn it into a hobby and build stuff constantly, because people see when you're not working on it. They won't not take you seriously, but the more you can work on, the higher chance you have of impressing somebody at a position, higher than yourself, whether that be in or out of your own company. I hope that's helpful, Marlene. It's a very specific, I'd like to work with you specifically on that. Outside of this, maybe I can help you to face that kind of issue. I see a hand up. Michael's got his hand up. Still not getting any volume out of your. Sorry, Michael. Feel free to put it in the chat. I'd love to answer your question, but just throw in the chat. Okay. We got another question here. is it a good idea to apply for the same job at the same company after being rejected or ignored? If so, how long would you wait? Great question. Great question. Sam, do you want to give your advice on that one?
I'm not sure I have a really good answer prepared for that one, actually. Same job. I think you're probably talking about spans of time.
Mm-hmm.
I would say reapplying for a job that you've already applied to after that particular post has been taken down and then put back up again might not be a bad idea. But we might be talking about a matter of months, I would think. Something in that category.
Yeah, I think if you're going to reapply, why are you reapplying? What's different now about when you first applied? What have you done to learn the skills that are required? That's why it's always a good idea if you get rejected to ask questions. If you're actually talking to somebody and you get rejected, ask for feedback. Okay, well, what could I do to better fill this position? I'd love to reapply in the future. And they might say, well, we're looking for somebody with more React experience. Okay, well, if you're going to reapply for that position, you better go out and learn React and build something, put it on your resume, and then reapply and say, hey, I know I was turned down before, but I've been working on that thing that I know you guys use, and here's an example of it. I'd love another shot at it. So if you're going to reapply, just make sure that you're doing something to improve yourself from the previous time. I hope that's helpful for you. Michael Smith, awesome. Let's see here. Michael Smith asks, for Marlene, typically it is too hard to be promoted into development from within the same company. I suggest moving to another company, or if the company is big enough, then trying another department. That's good advice. I've heard a similar issue with difficulties moving up in a company. Michael, did you want to kind of expand on that as to? Do you have any? Okay. No, Mike, it's fine. Okay. I've heard a similar stories from people in the industry that it's easier to get promoted by moving from one business to another. The nice thing is that once you have more experience on your resume, you're that much more likely to land your second job. Your first job is your hardest one to land because you're new to the industry. Once you have that first job and you've got a year or so of experience on your resume, you can look for the job that you really want after that. You can be a lot more picky. So if you're feeling stale where you are and you want to move up, maybe it's time to move on to somewhere else, especially if they don't appreciate you where you're at, is what it kind of sounds like. Okay, let's see here. Who else has got? Looks like Drew Sloan's got a hand up.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, Drew?
How's it going? So yeah, I'm only like 50% completed with the software development program, and I'm living here in Portland, Oregon. And I guess I'm kind of curious. Obviously, I haven't started the job search yet, but how open should I be to relocating, or I know the job market is, pretty much decimated just because of COVID and everything else. But I guess I'm just curious, how open should I be to relocating, or how strong is the market here in Portland?
Yeah, Sam works with our Portland students. Maybe Sam, you want to take this one away?
Sure. So as far as the job market in Portland, I'd say it's just as strong as anywhere else in the industry. We seem to be in the industry that has the best adaptability to the conditions that COVID presents. So what I found working with the graduates and students who've gotten hired for the Portland area, it's not so much a shift in like location or types of job, but just a shift in how you would normally operate the job search in general. So lots more online meetings. In the old days, you used to be able to bring in your resume, meet the hiring manager, maybe do a little bit of networking on the way to actually applying. These days it's going to be a little bit different. You're networking still, but you're doing your online forums, or you're following people more individually. As far as being open to being relocating, definitely. I think it will just serve that much larger of an area to choose from. I have seen quite an increase in the amount of students who are landing online positions for their first job, which is it used to be very rare. It was kind of a company was taking a leap of faith that you were not only able to do the work, but trained and diligent enough to complete it online. But now it's just kind of the mode that we're working with. And so a lot of companies are adapting and coming up with that. If you want a good indicator as to what types of companies, especially for the Portland area, portlandtech.org is a great website that has the careers pages of something like 500 local Portland companies from Beaverton to Gresham and even Vancouver. So I think that one's a good one to include in your search. And I'd say even halfway through your software developer course, it would be worth it to start your networking, start engaging your networking on a regular basis, and even potentially throw your hat in the ring and start applying to some places so you can get some conversations going. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that answers your question.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, if you're thinking about moving just for a job, look in your area first, because there's absolutely stuff. And remote. I work specifically with remote students. People are laying remote jobs every single week. So if you are, you don't want to move, remote is a very good option, even if you live in like an area with no tech companies. But Portland is huge on tech. There's like hundreds of tech companies here, so lots of options. Michael Hinshaw. I wanted to follow up on with Marlene's question. I'm having trouble balancing my job search time and my learning portfolio building time. I definitely have some imposter syndrome, and I've been coding for a few years before I started my camp. So I want to spend time building a portfolio for sure. How far into your camp are you at this point?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you now.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I'm in the job search portion of my camp. So I just finished my Python developer boot camp.
Gotcha. And you're feeling some a little bit of imposter syndrome. So is the question that you want to spend a while building your portfolio before you jump out into the job search?
Not necessarily. It's more that I want to be ready for whatever job I encounter, like what was I guess touched on earlier. I think that it's just a matter of my soft skills, interview skills, the idea of just like putting out resumes, all that stuff, coming also from the restaurant industry. Like I feel good about all that. I know how to interview. But as far as for something like this, where I know I'm going to get presented a question where I'm just going to be like, what? And, not being ready. I think that's the most afraid thing about the whole thing, the most
yeah. You don't want to look silly or be put in a situation where you can't give the right answer, because nobody likes rejection. Nobody likes to be turned down. I would say for situations like that where you're worried about getting into the interview and being faced with questions that you don't know, the best way to get better interviews is to do interviews and to practice them. There are always going to be those interviews that you just don't know every answer to, and that's fine. Take notes of the stuff that you're learning, that you're being asked in the interview, and follow up with that kind of stuff. Okay, I've noticed on every interview I've had, they keep asking me about, Ajax or jQuery or something that I'm not super familiar with. You'll start to see that trend, and then you say, okay, I need to get better at this. And then we also help with, we help with this interview practice. We could do a mock interview every day if you wanted to help gain that confidence. If you're building up your portfolio, if you're applying, if you're doing all the right things, you're gonna land that job. It just takes a while. But if you're not getting to the phase where you're actually getting interviews and putting out applications, you'll never get past that fear level, because you'll never think that you're quite ready enough. I can guarantee you that you are. If you've gotten through our boot camp, if you've gotten to the job placement portion, if you're building up your resume, you said you've been coding a bit before the boot camp as well. You absolutely are ready to land that job, and you got to just jump out there and do it. Because, this week alone, we had 9 people, the graduates of this boot camp, land jobs within the last 4 days. 9 people, and that's huge, especially because right now we're in COVID. It is Christmas season. People think, oh, should I even be applying right now? Because are there even jobs out there? There are new tech jobs every single day. We keep an eye on leads. We send out leads, daily or weekly or what have you. And I only look for jobs that have been posted within the last day. So there's new jobs every single day being posted. And the only way to get better at those questions and get better at those situations is to practice. Go into an interview. If you mess up, they're not going to make fun of you. They're not like, who is this guy coming into an interview who doesn't know, everything about .NET? How dare him? They're going to, they're generally, I've never heard of somebody getting insulted at an interview, or if it is, you don't want to work there. So move on to the next one.
Right.
But if you got great soft skills, that can take you such a far way. If you're good at interviewing with soft skills, that can go so much further. because you can train somebody to be a good programmer. You can't really train somebody to be a friendly, nice person. If you're a nice person, if you can smile, if you can show up on time, and you're teachable and you're passionate, that is so much more valuable than you fit every single other question on our job posting, you know. But like I said, come to us, we'll help you practice these questions. Take note of everything that you don't know and have a base understanding of it at least, you know. If you go into an interview and they're like, wow, what's your experience with Java? Well, I don't have experience with Java, but here's what I understand about Java. It's very similar to this, which I do know. And here's what I do know about that thing. And then go into what you do know. Always focus on what you do know, not what you don't know. If you don't know something, what's similar to it and what do you know about it? Because a lot of those skills are kind of transferable. You'll often see like knowledge in one of these 3 languages and they want like Java or C++ or C# or something. If they ask you about Java, well, I know C#, and you know, here's what I do know about that. Kind of deflect from the negative, you know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. But as far as like when you very first start out, you know, to the beginning of the thing is like, Sam and I talked about this yesterday, is like, how much time do you really balance like, okay, I'm going to work on this project instead of putting out, you know, or like tidying up my resume or putting a new feature on my, you know, portfolio page so that they can see something or whatever it is, you know. How do you balance that time? How do you, like, what should be your main, I mean, mainly you should be job hunting and then a little bit of that stuff, or?
It's all about balance. This job search period is a full-time job. This is your job right now, right? Like what you're doing right now is a job. So treat it as such. Have a schedule for yourself. Okay, I'm gonna work on this every single day, 5 days a week, 8 to 5, like a career, like a job. And okay, for the first 2 hours, I'm gonna follow up on companies I did yesterday or I applied to a couple days ago. From 10 to 12, I'm going to research companies. From 12 to 12:30, I'm gonna take a lunch, and then after that, and then have like, okay, 2 hours at the end of my day, I'm gonna work on this project every single day. And you stop your job search and you work on that project, and you schedule that time out to where it's not like, today I feel like doing this or feel like doing that, because all that wishy-washiness it's gonna push you in the wrong direction. You got to have a very, be strict with yourself. Treat yourself like, we treat ourselves as kind of bosses of people that are in job placement and finding a career. You know, if you need somebody to like tell you to get back on schedule or check in with you, make sure that you're on time. That's what we're here for. You know, we want to make sure that you keep those schedules. So treat your job search like a full-time job is so important. Down to the point of like scheduling out your tasks, because it makes a huge difference. But also give yourself breaks. Don't work on a code. If you're like stuck on a coding problem or a coding assignment for like hours and hours and hours way past you're supposed to do, you're just going to dig yourself a hole. Like, cut yourself off. Okay, 2 hours on this. If I can't figure it out in 2 hours, I'm moving on to the next thing. I'll come back to it tomorrow. Hopefully that helps out a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. Thank you.
Of course. Kenzie asks, is there any websites that aggregate remote jobs by time zone? By time zone, I don't actually know about time zone. I'm definitely like by area, and you could do. That's an interesting question. I know there are jobs.
Or just any websites that generally aggregate remote jobs, but it would be nice if it was done.
So there are companies that just do remote jobs. There are like we work remotely, remotely.com or remotive.com. There's a bunch of just straight up remote job sites that only deal with remote positions. So you can work anywhere in the country and work in these places. A lot of times they're limited in what's listed on there because they're like remote positions. Not that there's not a lot of remote positions out there, but if you go to say LinkedIn or Indeed and look for remote positions, you're going to find far more. Because if you just type remote into the area instead of Portland or what have you, it'll just pop up stuff that's remote. But in terms of time zone, I'm not 100%. That's not something I'm 100% sure of. Rob, I'm going to jump to you real quick. I'm going to do this last question here, and then we'll jump over to you. How long does it typically take for graduates to apply and land jobs? Sam, what's your experience with that?
Oh, I usually start to gauge that in the amount of resumes. I would expect to be sending out at least somewhere between, and then I've gotten this number from like Tech Talks of past, like 250 to 350 resumes before you get a really good pool of interviews that will land you offers, because not all applications are going to be created equal, and not all interviews are going to be created equal either. So kind of on the vast average, I'm thinking somewhere around like 250, 350 applications, and however long that takes to get that to you. So.
Which sounds like a lot, but how many weeks would that take if you wanted to, if you were doing like what we recommend and you wanted to get 250 applications out? That's like 5-6 weeks maybe. That's like a month and a half. If you're getting, you can get out 300 applications in a month easily. We recommend 10 applications a day, 50 a week. So you want 250, that's 5 weeks. You could have a job. The 9 people that we just had land jobs this week, I think, was it 2 or 3 of them, Sam, that were still not even graduated yet? Something like that. Yeah. So less than a day, negative days on those. A couple of them, within a couple of weeks. It really, just like she said, it takes as long as you put the work in. If you are sending out 2 applications a day, if you're not following up, if you're not working on your LinkedIn, if you're not doing all the things that we set out for you to do, then it's going to take longer and longer and longer. And you're going to fall off. And then you're going to get disappointed because 6 months down the road, you don't have a job yet. And you're, well, this isn't going to work. It's because you weren't doing the steps we placed out for you to do. You weren't doing everything we suggest doing on the job placement course, which is sending out a high volume, casting a wide net, networking, and staying in touch with us so we can help you out. So it can take as long, I've seen it take upwards of 6 months, but those people typically fall off and they don't follow the, what needs to be done. Rob, you had a question, and I think that might be our last question because we're running into 2 o'clock here.
Well, it's not. You were talking about with the remote jobs. I just wanted to bring it up. I've noticed when I've been applying for them, some of them you have to be kind of careful because towards the bottom, they'll say if they're only hiring for certain states or not, or they want to be like I saw one that if you're not on the West Coast, then they don't want you to even apply.
Yeah.
So I just want to bring that up. That's all.
That's a great point. If you're dealing with remote work, look. It'll always say it on the job posting typically, and they'll say remote in Oregon, remote in New York, or what have you. Or they'll say completely. Usually, if it says 100% remote, that's a good chance that it's like you can live in Oregon and work in New York. But typically, they want you close-ish because of time zone differences. If you need to come to the office for whatever reason, they want you to come meet the people there. It's less of a risk to hire somebody who's a little bit closer because of reasons like that. They can rely on you to be at work on time, and they don't have to like change their schedules around because there's a 3-hour time difference between you. So doesn't mean there's not people landing 100% remote positions out there. There's tons of them, especially right now. But just like I said, kind of be cautious of what you're looking at. All right, I don't think we have any more questions in the chat, and we're running towards the end here. Like I said, we're here to help with whatever you have, no matter what aspect of the course you're on for the program. If you're brand new to the Tech Academy and you are, I think the earlier you get in contact with us, the earlier we can help you, the better, because then by the time you hit job placement, you're running, you're not crawling into it. So if you have any questions, reach out to job placement, please. We love talking to you guys. We're always, trying to help out. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to us. I'm Forrest. This is Sam. And that's Rick. He's our student care director. I'm sure a lot of you know him. Rick, looks like you had a hand up. Do you have any questions there?
I actually have a comment. Just want to let everyone know that our talks are posted on our YouTube channel after. And Forrest was speaking of Edmund Jones' talk. That was a couple weeks ago. It is on our YouTube channel, so you can definitely check it out there after our talk here.
Yeah, you should go back and watch all of them, because they're all useful. We don't have any bad speakers. Everybody's got something useful, and it's almost always job search related, because I'm the one that organizes the tech talks, and I want to help you guys land jobs. So it's it's previous graduates, it's professionals in the industry, it's all sorts of stuff, but it's typically related to how you land a job in the industry. So check it out. I highly encourage it. All right, I won't take any more of your time. Sam, do you have anything else you wanted to add before we?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming. Like I said, reach out to us if you have any questions. And yeah, we'll see you at next one.